Hey guys, it's me, Sam Stein, managing editor at the Bulwark. I am joined by Tim Miller and Tim Mak. Tim Mak, for those who know, is at Counteroffensive, and he is on the ground in Kyiv, and not just Kyiv, I'm assuming all of Ukraine. Happens to be in the Bulwark headquarters in DC today. Was sitting in my office, and we decided to talk about the apparent ceasefire talks that have come out from a conversation with Vladimir Putin.
Apparent
and
ceasefire is a really nice way to say it. I don't even know if it's an apparent.
I said apparent ceasefire talks.
Yeah, okay, apparent talks. Yeah,
just apparent talks. Before we do that, please subscribe to the feed. All right, let me just set it up, and then I'll let you guys take it away. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump had a phone call today. It was lengthy, like super lengthy, over an hour. We get some readouts from it. The general gist, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but the general gist is, per the readouts from both sides, there is some sort of ceasefire. It appears to be a 30-day ceasefire that will involve targeting of energy and infrastructure components in Russia and Ukraine. So neither side will attack each other's energy or infrastructure components. There will be objectives to have a future ceasefire around maritime activity in the Black Sea, and then, of course, working to some sort of full ceasefire. Those will involve negotiations in the Middle East that will begin immediately or soon. That's basically where the readouts kind of end when in terms of convergence. The divergence here is that on the Russian side, the Kremlin wants a halt to all military armament of the Ukrainians, and they made some sort of vague notion about wanting to have a total end to foreign military support and intelligence sharing as well. And the key condition to stop the conflict from escalating, it's being read as they want to feel like Ukraine is not a threat to them. The Kremlin also said that there's a hockey match that potentially will happen between the U.S. And
a friendly.
Russian, friendly. On the American side, they talked. There was some mentioning of stopping Iran from posing threats to Israel and working collaboratively in the Middle East. All right.
I want to get to Tim Mak for his expertise, but I'm going to pop off and I want to translate, Diplo speak to real talk, and I want to see how much Tim agrees, and then he can get into the details. Okay, so here's the thing. The only actual ceasefire upon anything is on energy infrastructure. And it should be noted that Ukrainian drones have been hitting Russian energy infrastructure. Russia also was hitting Ukrainian infrastructure. But even still, you could see why Putin would have agreed to that. You mentioned this, but I would just draw a finer point to the Russia side. Like, their statement was much longer and included a list of things that Trump wanted that they were like, we're considering. We're considering this thing that Trump wants, but we're in the driver's seat here, so we'll see how it goes. I felt like there was an alpha energy coming from the Russia side, whereas the U.S. statement was like, we're going to have a great friendship in the future. It's going to be really nice. So I felt like Putin also, as you mentioned, made him wait for an hour.
Is that true?
It is true. They joked about it. Like, Putin was live.
He was on stage giving remarks, and someone yelled at him, "Aren't you supposed to be talking to President Trump right now?" And he was very dismissive about it. And it was obvious that he made him wait. He did make him wait.
Yeah. So anyway, so that to me, like, that is like the key summary is that this Trump said he could make a deal in 24 hours. Even in this one phone call, they're not even close to anywhere close to a deal. Putin kind of made him into a beta. And I guess the only encouraging thing, because I don't like to just always be Mr. Negative, is that on the Russia side, they said that, to get a lasting peace, we want no more military or intel support for Ukraine from the U.S. And so I guess for those of us who are expecting total surrender today, like, the one positive thing is that I guess the U.S. being we here, did not agree to that initially. So Tim, translate all that. How do we do?
Yeah, is that right?
You notice how none of these statements refer to what Ukraine's willing to do, right? So we haven't yet had any acknowledgement so Zelensky is in Finland right now. These two are negotiating once again without Ukraine at the table. And without consideration for Ukraine's national interests, right? So this is very much the Trump administration view that Ukraine is not a peer. It's not meant to be included in these conversations. So they've agreed on it. But, in the medium term, it's obvious that these are not terms that Ukraine is going to sign on to. They're not
Why
going
not?
to agree. Well, they're not going to agree to the cessation of all military aid from the United States and Europe as a condition of these longer ceasefires or broader ceasefires.
But
And
wasn't
so
it true? Wasn't it true though just a week ago that Kyiv was willing to accept a full unconditional ceasefire?
Not unconditional.
Not unconditional. Okay.
Not unconditional, but a ceasefire along immediate lines, air, sea, and along the front lines as well.
Okay.
But not in return. So you see how the Kremlin has kind of moved all of the goalposts here, and is now putting the cessation of military aid and intelligence on the table as part of this. So they've given very little, but they've kind of flagged that what they're going to demand for the rest of it is for the United States and all Western partners of Ukraine to stop providing military aid.
Have they given
That's
anything?
not going to be.
You said they've given very little. Like, what are they being asked?
Yeah.
to
What are
do?
the Russians being asked to do that? I guess stopping the target of energy infrastructure in
They're
Ukraine.
only being asked to stop. Right. So right now, the Russians have quite a lot of momentum in the Kursk region. That is the small bit of territory that Ukraine has controlled on Russian territory. And they're probably in the next 24 to 48 hours going to withdraw completely from that area. Right. So Russia.
Or the Ukrainians?
No, the Ukrainians are withdrawing. So they're in the middle of a fighting retreat right now, and so we've already seen some of the consequences of the last pause of American intelligence and military aid. That is to force Ukraine to give up a major negotiating chip.
Is the intel sharing back online, or is that not your understanding?
They have said that the intel sharing is back online. The thing is that you can't just turn this on and off like a switch. There was an actual operations center in Ukraine where they come together to analyze the intelligence and pass it on. That center, the people that were manning that center left. So it's got to take some period to kind of build up again, bring those people back. So I don't know the specifics of whether the extent to which the intelligence sharing has restarted. But this is not something that you can just kind of turn on and off and beam intelligence into various places in an instant.
Part of what you do with counteroffensive I really appreciate is just like with your being on the ground in Ukraine is it's kind of reporting on like real life, like life and among the Ukrainians. And so, I mean, obviously this just happened like an hour ago. So I assume you haven't been, signaling with your pals in Donetsk or whatever. But what is just your sense for like the mood there, like how a deal such as this might be interpreted among kind of regular everyday Ukrainians rather than the top political brass?
One of the costs of the decline of mainstream journalism and the closure of all these foreign bureaus is that I think that the foreign coverage of what's on the ground in places like Kyiv or elsewhere around the world is really very poor, and I don't think we've conveyed to the public quite how angry the Ukrainians are and how betrayed they feel. Trust is a funny thing. It takes years to build and seconds to destroy, and it's utterly obliterated. You can turn on the aid, you can turn on the intelligence sharing, but the fact that it was ever turned off while people are actually dying, and I wouldn't dismiss the idea that hundreds of people had died in that interim period directly as a result of. I have no specific evidence of that, but I
have some evidence actually. I was talking to a different reporter there who was talking about just the percentage of material that like the missiles and the drones that was getting through. Right. And so again, can you do 1-to-1 on was this death or whatever? But when we were in sharing intelligence, it was something like only 10-20% of the Russian air raid, missiles or drone material was like landing. And it was up above 50% after the intel sharing stopped, right? So their success rate increased significantly. So that is a 1-to-1 relationship with us. That was our fault. Those deaths were our fault.
If there's any signal that you should pay attention today, it's that just as soon as they finished putting out this readout, a new wave of drone attacks on Ukraine immediately began by Russia, right? It was not general. It was not localized enough. It's just happened as I was getting on with you folks. But it is not there is no ceasefire. It has not happened. There's nothing has been agreed to.
Yeah, I mean, Zelensky has to sign on to it. I mean, that's the big unknown right now. And my question for you, Tim Mak, is: all right, so Zelensky's in Finland. He's obviously not a party to these conversations, but the simplest read of it is that he's being boxed in here, right? Like he can't then turn around and say, "No, I don't actually support a 30-day ceasefire around these energy and infrastructure targets." That he's going to have to take this because how could he not?
Yeah, that's the most likely outcome. And then trying somehow to navigate this demand by the Russians, which the Americans, I think, are inclined to commit to, at least in the near term. But I don't think Europe's going to commit to it, and Ukraine's not going to commit to it. This cessation of military aid and intelligence, and then once again, I think we're going to see another round of the Trump White House then demanding that its allies stand down and accept a ceasefire at any cost. And we're going to see another round of friction.
What's your understanding of how these Middle East talks are supposed to transpire? Who's going to be the point person? Will Ukrainians be involved in those at all?
It's not. There's been no signal at all from the Trump administration that they see Ukrainians or even Europe as a peer in these conversations. And they see Europe and Ukraine as sort of nasty realities on the ground that they need to deal with, but not certainly not partners, certainly not allies. And one of the people that was supposed to be involved, General Keith Kellogg, who was supposed to be an envoy to both Ukraine and Russia, has been totally boxed out of the talks now. So it's
for being too friendly to Ukraine.
He was being accused of being too friendly to you.
Right. Yeah.
What is his remit was Russia and Ukraine has just made only Ukraine.
Now it's Ukraine. It's
can't talk to Russia.
He doesn't have the negotiating power to speak to Russia now.
Yeah. I mean, this the absurdity of this whole situation, right? Like when you step back, is that you have the fucking hockey game, that Trump's like, oh, we're gonna have a friendly in Vladivostok.
He clearly is like, oh, it's the Olympics, the Miracle on Ice,
Penguins, and we're gonna bring you some Kentucky bourbon, and you'll bring us some vodka. Like the whole thing is preposterous, and they're gonna go meet in the Middle East. And Trump in the interview, yesterday, or the day before, talks about how we're gonna divide up the assets. Like he's a mediator in a fucking divorce proceeding between two rich people, and where he's on just the side of the dude that was cheating, right? Like the whole thing is a ridiculous farce where Sam's question was, is Zelensky boxed in? And that's like their plan, right? Like Trump is trying to box in Zelensky by siding up to Putin, cutting him out, promising that we're going to have some great relationship with Russia in the future. I don't know what fucking Russia is going to bring to us economically. I can't imagine anything. Fur coats, maybe. And I just don't, like, Tim, you tell me, but like there's a reason, I think, for the Ukrainians and Europeans to be like, no, fuck you, pound sand.
Yeah, they're trading 20% of Ukraine away for a hockey game. I mean, it's ridiculous. The issue is, and the answer isn't clear, whether Europe and Ukraine can go it alone. But we're looking at we're staring into a very dark future, right? We're looking at a Europe which, when they understand, as they do now, that they can't rely on the United States, we're looking at Poland developing a nuclear weapons program, as will Germany, most likely. This is a much more dangerous world that we're looking to over the next 5-10 years.
Well, to me, it's like the outcome that is so easily foreseeable is that a meeting happens or negotiations happen in the Middle East. Ukraine is not party to them. They emerge with some sort of declaration that Russia gets to hang on to Crimea for whatever, the eternity.
More than that.
Yeah. And on top of that, some of the territory they took over in eastern Ukraine. And on top of that, there will be an end to the armament of Ukrainians for some period of time. That all is put into some sort of treaty that Ukraine doesn't sign on. And then Europe comes in and says, we're going to keep arming them. And Ukraine says, we're going to keep taking arms from Europe. And then suddenly you have a completely rearranged conflict where it's actually the U.S. on the side of Russia, formally. And it's Europe with Ukraine on the other side. And then you're in really dangerous territory.
Yeah, I don't think the United States is going to actively be adversarial towards Ukraine, but you could see
You don't
Trump
think
just
so?
getting tired.
I mean,
Well,
he did undress Zelensky in the Oval Office.
Well, what I mean by that is I don't see America invading Lviv
No,
and Western
I
Ukraine.
don't think that. I don't think that.
But you could see the trajectory of this all unfolding in slow motion, right? Is that exactly what you just described, Sam? Which is that the United States will say, I guess Zelensky isn't committed to peace after all because he won't give up his country and the safety of his citizens, and that will be the ball game.
Yeah, there's
Or the
another
hockey
wrinkle
game.
to this that the Ukrainians are pointing out, and I think that like there's this natural kind of like assumption that like Trump's just going to give Putin what he wants, and so that eventually they'll come to some sort of deal. But the Ukrainians are pointing out the other kind of element to this. Their statement on this is that the only proposal they came to was with regards to energy infrastructure ceasefire was because ultimately Putin wants war, right? And that from their perspective, it's like, yeah, okay, the only thing Putin agreed to was this because he's not actually interested in a ceasefire. He's just kind of running Trump along here.
That was my point, though. Ukraine's actually offered much more in terms of a ceasefire than Putin was willing to agree to.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are the aggressors.
Well, that's thrilling. It's great stuff. Tim, you got anything else? Do you have anything, any little sunflowers for us from your time in Ukraine that you can bring it home with?
No, it's only going to get worse from here. So
welcome to the Bulwark YouTube page.
Yeah, that's our
tagline.
Yeah, it only gets worse. All right, guys, the Tims. Thank you, man. Thank you, Tim Mak. Thank you, Tim Miller. Appreciate it. Thank you guys watching. Always subscribe to the feed. We'll talk to you later.
Hey, YouTube fam, if you want to support the Bulwark, the best way to do it is by becoming a YouTube Bulwark Plus member. The Bulwark is truly independent. We have no corporate overlords. We're not settling any dumb lawsuits with Trump. By joining, you help support our work, and you can get a bunch of perks right here on this platform. Ad-free content, bonus videos, live streams, and some emojis of me, which I guess some people want. So come join, come hang out, become a Bulwark YouTube Plus member, and I'll be seeing you in the comments. So behave.